What's happening, everyone? Thanks for rejoining me for the fourth part of the James Clear Atomic Habits Book Club review. This one is going to be about making everything easy, the third law. And we talked about in the first two, make it obvious, make it attractive. And when you've settled those two conditions, then we talk about how to come into the idea of let's put ourselves in the best position to succeed at this point. So the chapter 11 starts out with walk slowly but never backward. And I was like, well, that makes sense. We're talking about progress here. We're talking about needing to make things easy. And how do we go about doing that so that we go ahead and ensure success, right? Well, that's the main thing. So really right off the bat, he hits us with the idea of motion versus taking action. And I thought this was actually kind of an interesting thing because I don't think if you were to say, I need you to get that in motion, or I need you to take action, a lot of people would think differently about those two statements. But motion, as he explains it, means there's no results necessarily, and actions have an outcome. And so that's the key difference here. So when you frame things in that perspective, he's kind of saying, or did say in the book, really, motion can be planning to do something, whereas taking action means you've done it. Or done something towards it, for that matter. It doesn't mean you necessarily have done it, or whatever it is. And the main thing, again, here is getting reps in. So just like anything else in life, the more repetitious you are, the more likely you are to either get better at it or just simply get used to doing it. And that's kind of the point here in both respects. The first concept beyond that is he talks about Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. So again, back on the repetition boat, repetition is a form of change. So I have some friends that have taken up, some serious lifting type stuff. And they talk about how their body learns and muscle memory and things like that. Now your brain's not a muscle, but it's got the same concept. If you wire it a certain way, it's going to know how to do certain things. And that gets us to automaticity, which is the ability to perform a task without thinking about each step. So how often do we catch ourselves doing this when you're sitting at home on the couch with a bowl of potato chips in front of you or something? The hand goes to the bowl, the hand goes to the bowl, the hand goes to the bowl, right? Very small example, but it's an example of how automaticity steps in and says, yeah, this is what we do. This is just how you react to this. And there we go. Yeah, it kind of really rang true with me. And then obviously you hadn't thought about the positive side yet. We'll get into that a little later. Keep moving forward on this one. It brings you to the idea that habits are formed on frequency, not on time, because there was a whole conversation, if you recall, about how long does it take to form a habit that'll be talked about in this particular section. And he's setting the groundwork for saying frequency is more important. You can set a habit in a day, potentially, depending on what it is, minor type task thing. Or it may take weeks if you don't do it very often, but it's something that's not got that frequency that you would do it very often. Which leads us to chapter 12, which talks about the law of least effort. So this one immediately kind of said to me, because I've had enough things where I know in life, if I make it where I have something that doesn't require a lot of effort, but is going to get the result I want, that's obviously going to be the first thing that you default to. It's just is a fact. That's who we are as humans. And even it gets into, he says the most value for the least effort is what we seek. And the first quote that I highlighted out of all this that really helped me process my thoughts, habits are easier to build when they fit into the flow of your life. So again, talking about those things, like he gave an example where if you sign up for a gym and that gym is 4 blocks outside of where your route home is, you're less likely to stop on the way home and or even come back on the way to work the next morning potentially. That is absolutely something that I think sticks out, is we have best intentions, right? But that intention doesn't mean a hill of beans if it's not easy. If you don't make it as easy as possible to make it automatic and that you're going to go ahead and do it. So, and it kind of comes back to the idea of actually what he wrapped up. He said, prime the environment for future use. And it's kind of funny because actually my wife, Sarah, and I actually just kind of really did do something like this in the past few days before I even read the chapter or the passage this time. So we were in a good habit over a year ago of every night ensuring that the large island in our kitchen was completely cleaned off to the way it should look and reset, which obviously meant that we felt pride in cleaning the rest of the kitchen and the general area. We kind of got away from that. It's not that we were messy. We just would leave things overnight or whatever. And we got back into the habit of doing that. Well, in the interesting thing here is we made it easy on ourselves because we said, it's got to be clear. So, the first thought is don't put something there if it doesn't belong there. So it kind of triggered things upstream for us. But then at night, it's really easy because it's like, if this needs done, just do it because you're going to get it off the counter. Or if it's not that important, move it to a different place where it should belong until you're ready to go do it. It was kind of an interesting type thing that really, really hit us, and kind of was something that when I read this chapter, I was just like, wow, that just clicks for me. There's probably things you do similar that click for you as well. I'd love to hear about those. The chapter 13 talks about the 2-minute rule, which I found this very interesting because I think this is, as he alludes to at the end of it, is actually against human nature to say, for the example of someone that wants to start walking or jogging, you normally go out and say, let me bang out 30 minutes, right? Well, it's not all about that necessarily. If you're not someone that's done this in the past and know you can drop right back into it, maybe your first thing is get your workout clothes on for a few days in a row. Yeah, ideally maybe step outside or go stretch or something, but it's not necessarily even about the walking. Get those first steps out of the way. Haha, bad pun. I didn't intend that one. Get those first things out of the way, and then when you even do start, only go out and say, I'm only going to do 2 minutes, or I'm only going to do 5 minutes. The point is, keep it limited so that you're not feeling like you have to do 30 minutes and you either aren't able or it's not something you've bought into. And a lot of people would say to that, as he points out, well, then that kind of defeats the purpose and kind of says, do I really want to do this, or can I even do this? And he said, fine. Think about it from the other side of this. If you limit yourself to saying, I can only do 2 minutes, then you're going to say, well, about third, fourth, fifth, sixth time once you've done it successfully, why am I limiting myself? I know I can do more. Now I've got this habit. Now you have that positive emotion coming around on it rather than energy, rather than that negative energy saying, oh, I have to go do this. It's, gosh, why am I limiting myself now at this point? I was like, that was a really, really cool way to look at it. In that same concept, he talks about decisive moments. And those are those things like we talked about, those putting on your shoes right before you're ready to walk. Those are those decisive moments because you put on the shoes, you've given yourself all the elements of success and set all the options that are in place that need to be set. And I said, how often do we do this? Like, I kind of pointed back to the example with my wife and I. We made decisive moments when we put things down on that counter. We know we've got to touch them later that night or they go away. So do we put it on the counter even, or do we not even deal with it? Or do we deal with it in that moment? So super interesting to see how these little things tie together. Talks about how all of these things also lead back to that voting idea. We talked about voting back in the introduction, actually, about how your habits can be positive or neutral or negative votes for things like that. And it really gets to the point of saying, putting on your clothes, positive +1 to work out, putting on your shoes and tying your shoes, positive +2, stretching, +3 now. Okay, well, you had a pretty good day. Maybe you didn't go walk, but you got all the way down that route, going out walking for 2 minutes, another +1. It is what it is. We have to look at that. And so he talks about how habits are the entry point, not the end point. And that's what we have to remember, is setting yourself up to absolutely be successful with any sort of habits, and stacking habits is the whole point here. Get to the right point where your rituals and routines get you where you want to be. And at the end of the day, the activity itself will break down and become much easier and much more done without thought, like we've talked about all throughout this book, essentially. It'll also make it feel like that new habit isn't a challenge, which I think is really a huge issue for many of us, because we oftentimes tell ourselves we can't do something, not what we have done or what we haven't done. And again, that's kind of a weird line, right? Because to say something you have done is great, but to say something you haven't done also kind of has to have that recognition of failure, but it's not necessarily a failure to me. And so go with me for a second, because when you're saying what I have done is this, I have came home from work and put my workout clothes on. I have come and I've stretched after that. What I haven't done is walked yet. So let me take that next step and walk 2 minutes. And it's all these things that you're setting yourself up and saying, how am I daisy chaining all of this together so that I can be what I want to be or do the activity I want to do. Super powerful to me. I know that really resonated with that and really went forward. The last chapter in this particular section, which was very short, it was the shortest of all the sections we're reviewing. Make good habits inevitable, bad habits impossible. Classic James Clear. If you haven't picked up by now, he is inverting this. He's saying, if it's a good habit you want to start, make it easy. If it's a bad habit or something you want to avoid doing, make it difficult. And he points to some things like a commitment device, like the example he said Victor Hugo when he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The publisher gave him a year and he kind of screwed around for the first 6 months. Then he told his assistant, take all of my clothes except this robe and I think some shoes or something. I forget exactly what it was. When he had 6 months left, and his publisher and his assistant looked at him like he was crazy, and he said, I'm gonna have this book banged out. And sure enough, 6 months later, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, just that little book, no big deal, right? Because he gave himself the ability to not have other choices, which can be difficult and to manage itself. But in this case, you get the idea. You understand that he set himself up so that in the future, he didn't have a whole abundance of choices. By limiting his wardrobe, he couldn't go out in public for really. So that's a bit extreme, but you get the idea. He basically said, I'm going to automate my next 6 months, which was kind of the last point I picked up out of this whole section was find automation. So his, again, is a very extreme example. He chose to automate his thought process by saying, well, unless I want to go out in just my robe, I'm probably going to have to sit here in my room and pound this out. But there's many ways to do that. And I kind of looked at it, and the last thing I picked up on there was how many of us would be willing to actually try the whole social media thing he talks about at the end, where when James is needing to have, a really, really, really productive week, he tells his assistant, in this case, it could be for you or I, if we don't have an assistant, I don't, to tell a friend or a family member, go change my Facebook password, then tell me on Friday what it was so I can go look at social media on the weekend. Yeah, I think a lot of people would be mortified, but I also think if you really were willing to do that, imagine how, and then you didn't try to cheat, imagine how much more you would get done if you're someone that your phone is your distraction. Now, are there other things on your phone besides Facebook? Yes, but go with me and pretend that Facebook's your biggest distraction. It's your main social, whether it's Insta, Facebook, whatever, TikTok. Imagine if you had someone borrow your access to that, knowing that if you needed it back for whatever reason, like, hey, someone told you they dropped you a message with something important or something, you could get back to it. And there's other means. Let's be honest about that. What would that do for you? I don't know that I'm ready to make that commitment, but I don't know that I have any habits that I want to start that would go to that level just yet. But it was an interesting thought, and I said, could I do that? And it's something that maybe we could try Sarah and I for a weekend or something. I don't know. Probably not a weekend. It's probably the worst time to do it. And I know she uses hers for a lot more business purposes than I do at the current moment. So maybe that's a bad idea. But the thought process is there is what are you willing to make that commitment device to help you be successful and either make it easy or make it difficult, right? Because some would even say the Hunchback of Notre Dame example made it difficult on himself too. And I could see that argument, but it's just super cool idea. So again, if you guys are liking this, please like the video. Please make some comments below. If you're listening on podcast, of course, you have the ability to like most of the podcasts on most of the platforms. And we'll see you next Tuesday with the last section of the main portion of the book before we wrap up the following week with section 6, which is going to go into some of the appendixes and a complete wrap up of the James Clear Atomic Habits. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.